Good afternoon and welcome to everyone to this panel devoted to the Scramble for the Eastern Mediterranean. This virtual panel is organized by ISPI in the framework of Rome-Med Mediterranean Dialogues, the long-year initiative of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation and ISPI. This year marks the 7th edition of Rome-Med Dialogues, and our biggest event will be at the beginning of December, hopefully in Rome. I'm delighted to introduce our distinguished guests, our distinguished speakers, and Nasser Al-Tamimi. Welcome, Nasser, who is a political economist, senior associate research fellow at ISPI for the Mediterranean and Middle East Center. Mithat Çelikpala, professor at Kadir Has University in Istanbul. Alessia Melkanji, Associate Research Fellow, ISPI, and Assistant Professor at the University of Sapienza in Rome, and also non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council. How many affiliations? And Gabriel Mitchell, Director of External Relations at the Israeli Institute for Regional Foreign Policy in Jerusalem. Welcome, Gabriel. And last but not least, Zenona Sierras, researcher at the Peace Research Institute in Oslo, Rio. So welcome to everyone. And we will focus on a very important topic this afternoon. Over the last years, the Eastern Mediterranean has been under the international spotlight as it turned into a major hotspot for competition among regional players, and not only regional players, several international actors are involved and operate in the area. We talk about competition for energy resources, but also about geopolitical competition for regional influence, as that makes this part of the Mediterranean a piece of a greater puzzle of the Middle East and North Africa, of the MENA region puzzle. More than 10 years ago, gas discoveries in the Eastern Mediterranean were expected to foster regional cooperation and to be a driver for the solution of long-standing disputes and crises that affect regional stability. However, while gas discovery was the catalyst of cooperation for some countries, it was, on the other hand, the reason of increasing tensions among other countries. Since the beginning of 2021, after an escalation of tensions that reached its peak last summer, so since the beginning of this year, we have witnessed a de-escalation in the area with resumptions of talks between Greece and Turkey, several attempts from the Turkish side to rapprochement with other regional players. Against this backdrop, gas exploration and exploitation activities are just one side of the coin, just one side of the issue. So we will try to understand with our speakers, with our experts, what are the interests and the agendas of the countries involved, of the regional countries. We will try to analyze and to understand what are the implications implications of their moves or their policies on the regional stability, on the regional security context, security complex, we can say. And we will see which factors could contribute to overcome divergences and what room for a wider cooperation. I would like to start with Gabriel Mitchell, trying to understand the Israeli views, the Israeli perspective. Israel is one of the major players in the Eastern Mediterranean and the first country where gas fields were discovered more than 10 years ago. So, Gabriel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you to ISPI for hosting this really important conversation. Obviously, as you framed it, Israel was one of the first countries in which offshore hydrocarbons were discovered in the 21st century. For most of Israel's history, Israel was effectively an energy island, dependent on importing its fossil fuels from, at times, the far corners of the globe, in large part due to its contentious relations with its Arab neighbors and a long-standing Arab boycott, which at times extended to much of the commercial sector as well. So the discovery of offshore hydrocarbons was a transformative event within Israeli domestic politics, within Israeli energy policy, and certainly from the Israeli perspective is the kind of touchstone upon which many of the Eastern Mediterranean's greater geopolitical implications have flourished from. But I think that there are two other developments from the Israeli perspective that are of equal importance. The first is the very gradual U.S. Withdrawal or the reduction of American military facilities in the region, both in the Middle East and North Africa and the Eastern Mediterranean more broadly, which has forced both Israel and some of the other actors in the region to kind of reassess their strategic needs and who are potential partners for cooperation. And certainly one of the traditional partners that Israel for many years had a strong strategic relationship with was Turkey. But over the last 10 years, Israel's relationship with Turkey has soured. Its set of strategic interests with Turkey has diverged in a number of different ways. And so those two significant geopolitical partners for Israel have in essence either been replaced by a new set of actors and a new set of partners in the region, or are just diminished in their presence and their engagement and involvement in regional affairs. So those are the three core developments: energy discoveries, the withdrawal of the United States, and the fragmentation of the Israel-Turkey relationship that has really formulated and shaped Israel's thinking over the last 10 years. And in essence, I think that Israel's goals in the Eastern Mediterranean can be defined as such. First, to contribute to the establishment of a framework for regional integration and cooperation that addresses the commercial and geopolitical benefits of hydrocarbon exploration. And the most visible example of that is the formation of the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum, to which Israel is a member. In addition, Israel is seeking to find multilateral solutions to adapt to the U.S. withdrawal from the region. Sorry, give me one second. My apologies. To find multilateral solutions to adapt to the U.S. withdrawal to the region in coordination with its regional partners and allies, to establish a norms-based framework to deal with maritime issues in the region, to tackle climate change that is increasingly affecting the Eastern Mediterranean.
Sorry to interrupt you, Gabriel. If you want, we can
yes,
turn
please.
to Ciaras, and then we will back to you.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thanks to you. So, Ciaras, Greece and Cyprus. First, Cyprus, the second area, taking into
crucial and interests in the Eastern Mediterranean. And I should add that Cyprus is a very which led them to, according to many scholars of American hegemony from the Middle East and the Eastern Mediterranean, had important effects about regional Turkey in conjunction with obviously domestic factors as well. For Greece and Cyprus, this was today is to deal with so-called Cyprus problem or Cyprus issue. So we had the Arab Spring, we had the rise of ISIS, based on cooperation, on multi-level cooperation between it or to, let's say, and so on. And that's why we ended up having the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum. Let's say an agenda-setting role. NATO relations are deteriorating, and with international companies, energy problem, which is Turkey, but also acquire some leverage. There is this understanding that regionalism in the south as a way and competition, but the way to do that is a big question.
Thank you.
That is a big question.
Thank you. In the Eastern Mediterranean, so as the result of the ocean in the Eastern Mediterranean. The ocean in the Eastern Mediterranean.
Hey, Valeria, it's Xenonas many times in the Eastern Mediterranean. There are reasons Ankara is excluded from all energy projects and security settings, developmental and geopolitical matters in Turkey's environment and the policy very currently in this region. As Xenonas mentions, issues, but also became a kind of a significant Greek relations in the East Med. The Arab Spring, Greece and Egypt has had a significant potential client rather than a transit state or for Ankara, for example, Turkish sovereign rights lively and very effectively, and this is a more Black Sea region as well. Therefore, in the jurisdiction, including the maritime claims around its mainland, also immediate trigger of Turkey's recent deposits, it's more about a wider East and France. And they are proactive or assertive to counter such an attempt. That creates a region of vital importance for Turkey. See Russia as a partner country to Turkey, not only of them are interconnected to each other, and what is in the same and sources. Therefore, what we need is to normalize the region. And this is the setup that affects not only
Mithat, for your clear and in-depth analysis of to Gabriel Mitchell for
I highlighted the importance from an Israeli concert with American leadership to find, but other regional actors, other regional actors as well. In that regards, there are ongoing negotiations between the monitoring of maritime traffic, both on the maritime environment and in general, and climate change and creating mechanisms and perhaps a way for actors in the region to cooperate with one another. And certainly what we've seen over the last year since the outbreak of the COVID pandemic is a concerted effort on the part of Israel's Ministry of Energy to reset its renewable agenda, align it much closer to the European Green Deal, and start to think creatively about what kind of multilateral steps can be taken in order to combat climate change. Finally, two other things that I think are critically important to Israel's strategy is to manage its relationship with Turkey. Turkey remains an important economic partner for Israel. Israel recognizes Turkey's strategic position in the region. And while the current dialogue between Israel and Turkey is not particularly constructive, Israel, I think, has gone out of its way to ensure that there's a window open for a normalization of relations with Turkey if and when Turkey is ready to have that conversation. And of course, relations may not return to the way they were in the 1990s, let's say, but Israel is leaving that door open while at the same time fostering and developing a new set of relationships with other actors in the region, including Greece and Cyprus and Egypt, and of course, its new normalization partners in the Gulf states. And that is a real segue to, I think, one of Israel's primary goals in the Eastern Mediterranean, because the regional space is overlapping with a lot of other regional architectures. And I think that for Israel, one of the key goals is to essentially bridge the developments in the Eastern Mediterranean into other regional spaces where Israel already has a large set of interests. So projects that can bridge the Eastern Mediterranean to Europe, such as the Euro-Asia interconnector, which will effectively connect Israel's electrical grid to that of Europe's, is a project that Israel sees as a way to take the developments of the Eastern Mediterranean and bridge them with its interests in Europe. And similarly, take those interests in the Eastern Mediterranean and bridge them to its new partners in the Gulf and in Africa as well. So Israel sees, I think, the Eastern Mediterranean as a hub of diplomatic activity, but it would not want to limit the potential of the Eastern Mediterranean within the boundaries of that regional space. It's constantly seeking and looking for partners, whether it be France, whether it be Italy, and whether it be other actors outside of this regional space, to take part in regional projects and to find areas for cooperation. I want to add just kind of a final note, because it ties into something that Mithat had mentioned, and that's the question of engagement with Turkey. And I think that for Israel, it's been a vexing issue of how to maintain some kind of a dialogue with Turkey while understanding the fact that, at least for the foreseeable future, Turkey's strategic interests and power projection in the region may not coalesce with Israel's interests, nor the interests of Israel's regional partners. And I think that one of the key examples, and something that's often overlooked, is that when Israel and Turkey normalized relations first in 2016, energy was, at the very least, at a discursive level, a central part of that normalization package, that there would be negotiations about the prospects of energy cooperation. And until as late as 2018, Israel and Turkey were engaged in negotiations about the prospect of energy cooperation, and those negotiations fell through over price. So I think that while we can talk about parties in the region not being interested in cooperating with Turkey, and I understand the fact that different actors may have a different set of interests and calculus when they're addressing Turkey, but I do think that on the one hand, it's easy to kind of package everything and frame everything as it currently exists today. But this region has been rapidly evolving over the last decade, and I don't think that it does anyone any benefit to kind of narrowly identify everything as one way. Things are changing, and they could change again in the months and in the years to come.
Thank you very much, Gabi. You raised a lot of interesting points. So the Eastern Mediterranean as a bridge connecting Europe, the Middle East, Asia. And but I would like to ask you a question related to what you said, how to engage Turkey. It's the one of the main issue. And do you see any possibility to include Turkey in the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum in the short, medium term?
In the short term, the answer is no. But the reason is based on the experience of the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum just a few months ago. All it takes is one country to veto a proposed new member in order for that vote to fall. So in the case of the EMGF, just a few weeks ago, the Palestinian Authority vetoed the entry of the UAE as an observer, right? So even if Israel was on board with the idea of Turkey joining the EMGF, you would need a consensus across the forum's many members, each of whom have their own disputes with Turkey to be on board. But I do think that there's opportunity for cooperation. And I think that the first way to start is to essentially change the dynamics of the conversation away from hydrocarbons, most of which have already been allocated and contracts have been signed, but really to be talking about climate change. Over the last couple of weeks, we've all seen the images of mucilage developments around the Sea of Marmara. Turkey is not alone in the Eastern Mediterranean to experience the effects of climate change, and I think that might be a way of having a constructive dialogue about common issues, and perhaps using that as a springboard for further conversations about other issues pertaining to maritime boundaries and perhaps energy cooperation.
Thanks, Gabi. Very interesting. So climate change could be a sector for future cooperation. And but we will back on this, as I would like to have the opinion of the other panelists. So, but now turn to Egypt, another important player in the area. And but I would like to ask you, Alessia, how to engage with Turkey. But first of all, but we will back on this later on. But first of all, what are the main drivers of Egypt's policy in the region, above all after the discoveries of gas field, of the biggest gas field in the Eastern Mediterranean in 2015 off the coast of Egypt? So over to you, Alessia.
Thank you, Valeria, and good afternoon to all. I'm delighted to be among these distinguished experts to discuss about the current Eastern Mediterranean geopolitical context. Let me also thank ISPI for organizing such an important event. To address directly your question about Egyptian interest in the Eastern Mediterranean, the main drivers of its politics. Egypt is currently committed to relaunch the country's image among regional competitors in order to recap its historical role as a strategic pivot in the Mediterranean. Centrally, in this context, the Eastern Mediterranean represents a line of strategic intervention due to the relevance of the basin as the new hotspot for the global energy market and new arena for regional actors' geopolitical competition, as you stated before. Of course, Egypt has an important interest connected with the energy sector. The country obtained a great success in the beginning of 2019 when President al-Sisi officially declared the achievement of the country's natural gas self-sufficiency, thanks to the increased production of the Zohr and Noor offshore gas field, thus covering the internal needs. Achieving natural gas self-sufficiency and ramping up production and distribution of liquefied natural gas, thanks to the launch of Idco and Damietta liquefaction plants, align perfectly with Cairo's economic priority. First of all, manage its natural gas resources in the most effective way to serve its domestic energy needs. And this will require maintaining the momentum of exploration and development in order to compensate for the depletion of existing fields and to accommodate rising demand. And second, garner revenue from exporting any surplus gas that it can produce, becoming a regional provider for energy trade. The interest in leveraging Eastern Mediterranean gas reserves led Egypt to bet on increased cooperation between Greece, Cyprus, Israel, which won Cairo signed bilateral deals for the delivery of gas to the liquefaction facilities in the country. This grouping culminated, as stated before, in the creation of the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum in January 2019, a platform aimed at developing a regional gas market, starting by taking advantage of the existing liquefied natural gas infrastructure in Egypt and supporting the construction of the subsea EastMed gas pipeline to Italy. At least the deal with Greece in economic energy fields and on areas of security. President Al-Sisi last March confirmed an agreement signed on August 2020 with Athens government regarding the designation of the exclusive economic zone that impinges on a zone part of the Turkey and the then Libyan government national accord deal. All these moves confirm the will of these countries to strengthen a broader alliance, to relaunch their position in the Eastern Mediterranean, but also to counter Turkish assertiveness for gaining control of a large part of the basin. Israel and Egypt had a tradition of acrimonious relation with Turkey. While the gas forum's anti-Turkey slant has also attracted the Emirates, which are engaged in an acute regional rivalry with Turkey. Like Egypt, the Emirates takes issue with Turkey's support for Muslim Brotherhood movement across the region. Thus, all the Cairo attempts to enhance its influence in the Eastern Mediterranean further exacerbated the dispute with Ankara. As we well know, Ankara reacted to this block by taking the field in the Libyan crisis, which represents a strategic geopolitical node for Egypt. In fact, besides energy interests, there are the geopolitical ones. Egypt focused on the energy factor as a tool for its geopolitical ambitions and for protecting its interests in the Mediterranean, such in Libya. The tension between Ankara and Cairo have spilled over into the Libyan crisis after the Ankara's signature of a memorandum of understanding with Tripoli along the maritime demarcation border that would allow Turkey to drill energy resources in Cyprus and Greek offshore. This agreement can be read as a Turkish strategy to reshape its position in the Mediterranean energy dispute, of course, and the Turkish presence in this fundamental area was always perceived by Al-Sisi as an alarming threat. The long-standing conflict within the Sunni world that sees Turkey and Qatar support soft political Islam against Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt was transferred into the Libyan front. It is evident that Egypt can hardly accept a Turkish-friendly Islamist government in Libya that controls the Libyan-Egyptian border because Cairo needs to safeguard its force western frontier bordering Cyrenaica and prevent dangerous jihadist penetration from eastern Libya. To conclude, of course, recently we are witnessing to a possible reconfiguration of geopolitical dynamics in the basin as a consequence of the current restoration of diplomatic ties among diverse regional actors, such as the current attempt to rapprochement between Egypt and Turkey. But also Turkey's recent diplomatic initiative to settle outstanding disputes with Israel and Saudi Emirates bloc. If all these initiatives will develop with positive outcomes, they would have direct consequence on the Eastern Mediterranean context, of course, that remain to be seen in the next month.
Thank you, Alessia, for your very clear analysis and presentation. And there is a question relating to this possibility to normalize relations between Turkey and Egypt. A question from our audience. Following the recent political consultations in Cairo, what should we expect in terms of bilateral reconciliation between Ankara and Cairo?
The last bilateral consultation that took place in Cairo, I think were really important in order to state some areas of cooperation. So first of all, Libya, and of course, the possibility to achieve a stabilization in the Eastern Mediterranean. And these are, of course, the two main areas of cooperation, and the most important element also for Cairo and for Turkey. I think that the relevance of this rapprochement between these two countries could have a consequence, not only, of course, in Libya, but also in the Eastern Mediterranean and the maritime border between these two countries. That possible deal on this regard would be represent a priority and could become a starting point for talks between both sides. Turkey and Egypt may negotiate the demarcation of the Eastern Mediterranean borders if the relation allows such a step. Of course, a rapprochement with Egypt would go a long way to ending the isolation of Ankara in issues related to the Eastern Mediterranean, but at the same time, a reduction in tension will create a better environment for Egypt to make progress with its effort to sustain its own natural gas surplus, and of course, to control the situation in Libya. So focusing its effort on the resolution of other very risky questions, of course, Libya, but also the Jordan dispute with Ethiopia, or to stabilize an uncertain economic situation. I think also that, of course, on the other side, that the announcement of the restart of diplomatic talk between Egypt and Turkey provoked different consequences in the other regional actors. For example, in Greek, the Greek government first that any agreement on a direct maritime border between the two countries will support the Turkish narrative on maritime rights in the Eastern Mediterranean. Anyway, the current condition for an Ankara and Cairo appeasement make an agreement unlikely. Although, if acting in tandem, Cairo and Ankara could ease the achievement of, first of all, a political solution in Libya and a general appeasement in the Eastern Mediterranean area. I think that it's possible to think about the creation of a sort of snowball effect that could involve a general appeasement in the Eastern Mediterranean area, especially look at the current situation.
Thank you very much, Alessia. And now we turn to another part of the Middle East. To the Gulf states, the Gulf monarchies, especially United Arab Emirates, which was mentioned before. Gulf monarchies that have been very active in the wider Mediterranean, in the MENA region, above all after the Arab uprisings in 2011. So what are the interest of these states that are not Mediterranean states, stricto sensu, but have a role, have played a greater and greater role in the region and also in the Eastern Mediterranean. I turn this question to Nasser Al-Tamimi. Please, Nasser, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Valeria, and thank you for the invitation and to include me even in this great panel and the great presentation. The Gulf is representing another angle. You know, everyone is, talk about the maritime borders and hydrocarbon reserve in the Eastern Mediterranean, but the Gulf state represent another issues, and their involvement in the area is related to geopolitics, not to maritime, because it's distant region from them, and it could be traced to the Arab Spring. And we talk about Gulf state, as you mentioned. First is United Arab Emirates. Second, Saudi Arabia, and then Qatar. These three countries, they have ambitious regional foreign policy, and they are deploying their financial and economic resources to back this ambition. When we look back 10 years ago, after the Arab Spring, we could see that the Gulf region is split in two camps. One camp is including Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. The other camp is Qatar, which aligned itself with Turkey, and from there we see evolving involvement from the Gulf state in the Eastern Mediterranean. From that time, these Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, they look at the region from geopolitics. First, they see that the Arab Spring is creating a lot of chaos. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. And creating a lot of chaos for these countries, especially Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. They were frightened that the Iranian will, from their perspective, the Iranian will exploit that chaos and expand their influence in the region. The second security threat received from Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates was the ideology, the so-called, political Islam, or mainly the Muslim Brotherhood, that they are a security threat, and if what's happening at that time in Egypt and Tunisia, and it could spread in the Gulf and create a new dynamic, or could topple the regime, or during the early years of the Arab Spring. And the third, security threat from their perspective, I'm talking about Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. As my colleagues already mentioned it, the American disengagement in the region. We see that in 2011, the American, they scaled down their involvement in Iraq, and at the beginning of the Arab Spring, which was ringing strongly in the Gulf, when Obama's calling publicly for Hosni Mubarak to step down, and from that, that development shaped the Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, their involvement in the region. From the Qatari side, this was very interesting as a result of the Arab Spring, is the alignment, or the converge of interest between Qatar and Turkey, and that relation was developing during the last decade, and still, as far as they're converge or aligned together, it will continue. So in that context, the Iranian threat, and also the third one, they perceive also the Turkish rising influence. They see the Turkish model aligning with political Islam and with the election and all of that. So they see that as a political threat for them. These all elements push them to be very active in the region. We see in Saudi Arabia, they lead the Gulf state in Syria, supporting the Syrian rebels, because in that time they thought that if they topple Assad, they will stop the Iranian advancing to the Eastern Mediterranean. The other issue is Turkey, and we see their position toward Turkey hardening all over the time, especially after the Turkey sided with Qatar in 2007, and later on, we could include the economic side, which is especially the United Arab Emirates. They have, if you see these three Gulf actors, I could say that United Arab Emirates is the most ambitious player, because they have a broader agenda, geopolitical agenda, and even economic agenda. And their involvement also was evolving regarding to regional development and international development, especially in the United States. We've seen them in Libya, very active, supporting General Haftar. We've seen them in Libya with Saudi Arabia supporting Sisi regime, from their side to keep and make Turkey as or not using or look at Egypt as a counterbalance for Turkey in the Mediterranean. And then, in the last few years, there is a lot of reassessment in their policy. They see in the American, they are changing administration. They see a lot of things happening in the Mediterranean. So we see the United Arab Emirates and also the pandemic give them like covered or excuse to from their perspective to pursue political relation with Israel. And in my opinion, at the moment, if you look at the Gulf state, I would say the United Arab Emirates is the most active player in that region. They are interested in the hydrocarbon projects in the region. They are interested in economic development, economic trade, and also the way I see the United Arab Emirates, they took a step further than Saudi Arabia and Qatar established their relation with Israel. And from United Arab Emirates perspective, they have many issues related to to the eastern side, Eastern Mediterranean, and issue also related to America and their domestic diversification program, because they think that Israel will be a good trade partner, will help them and expand their diversification program from tourism and real estate to technology, and we see the United Arab Emirates, their sovereign fund is very active in this kind of new technology and artificial. This is that to sum it up, there start with geopolitics and to keep status quo and keep the political Islam from power in the Arab Eastern. The second is they expanding their political diplomatic relation with Greece and Cyprus, and if you see Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, their political position aligned with the Greece and the Cyprus in supporting them against Turkey. I think that's the main issue, and thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Nasser, for your very in-depth intervention. You mentioned the United States and the new Biden administration has inaugurated a different foreign policy, but towards the Middle East there are elements of discontinuity and elements of continuity. And the question is, from the Gulf perspective, what changes can we expect in the U.S. posture in the region, towards the region?
I think the American position have a big impact in the Gulf state. Especially Saudi Arabia. If you see the 4 years before the Trump administration, his core policy, or it depended on 3 countries: Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Israel. And he disengaged in most of the area. That was incentive for Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates to escalate their involvement in Yemen and Libya and even in the Eastern Mediterranean, and develop a strong relation with Greece. And the change of the administration, I think it will cool down the relation with Saudi Arabia, and they will have a lot of issues with the United Arab Emirates regarding China, human rights issues, and not just only the United States, also their policy in the region faces a lot of setbacks. You know, in Libya, the involvement of Turkey changing the balance in Egypt. The Egyptian government, they have their own interest and their own agenda regarding Libya, and some of it is collided with the United Arab Emirates. And so, in my opinion, I don't think the fundamental issues or the disagreement among the Gulf states, especially with Qatar, will disappear. It will be there, but I would say it is a truce or this escalation of but the main issues is still there, and the conflict could flare up any time in the future, changing of the regional development or changing of the U.S. administration, or many domestic issues inside Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates.
Thank you, Nasser. And I see that many questions from the audience arrived. So I will open the Q&A now, and I hope that we will have time to answer all questions. We have a question from Dina Facuzza for Zenonas about the architecture you mentioned in your intervention, and what kind of parallel architecture away from traditional antagonism could be established, and what are, in your view, its main components?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. Probably the $1 million question. But I'm going back to what Gabi said before, because I think we need to think outside the box, acknowledging that, as Nasser probably mentioned, that these new issues of hydrocarbons and energy resources are not standalone issues. They are connected to sovereignty and geopolitical traditional problems. So those who believed maybe 10 years ago that these major problems would be solved through energy were very wrong. And actually, what energy has managed to do is exacerbate these problems. So we need to move away from that line of thinking and find new ways of transcending perhaps issues that concern everyone. And as Gabi mentioned, and the environment, climate change, renewable energy, and all that stuff, which is to everyone's concern, is the future, could potentially, under conditions, become the platform for some kind of cooperation. But this doesn't eliminate the fact that we still have problems to overcome. How, for example, would Israel and Lebanon find themselves in the same international forum? How would Turkey and Cyprus do that? How would Greece allow Turkey to participate in such a parallel structure? Because that's what I was referring to. The only thing I can think of is that we need to have more dialogue, and perhaps we need to come to some sort of a minimum agreement on issues that we need to discuss without letting that spilling over into traditional fears and concerns, either when it comes to threats or when it comes to issues of recognition. That we need to take all that geopolitical and legal even load off these discussions and try to work our way up from somewhere that is, a common concern. I know, I am very well aware that this sounds idealistic and romantic, but perhaps we need to start thinking like that if we're to unlock the prospects of the region, because otherwise we're just locked to what has been there for the past 50 years, and that cannot be the solution.
Thanks, Zenona. Very, very clear. So we need to look for common denominators and to change a narrative and open a window for dialogues. Turning to Turkey, there are a couple of questions about Turkey. The first one is why Turkey's activity in the Eastern Mediterranean is usually labeled as a warring neo-Ottomanism, while the same attitude from other stakeholders in the area are generally seen as simply action to pursue their strategic vision. Mithat, would you like to answer this question?
Yes, Valeria. In fact, I feel like a Russian academic, most probably when we are discussing Eastern Mediterranean or Black Sea related security issues or the Caucasus related, Russia bashing is a kind of attitude. And now Eastern Mediterranean related issues or the Black Sea related issues, Turkey emerges as a other. Of course, this is a presentation on Turkey's attitude. As a person or academic, I'm also very critical of some attitudes of the current government in Turkey, and by saying that this neo-Ottomanism or other kind of an expansionist labels on Turkish foreign policy are, they are not realistic. They are a kind of an imagination. Of course, you can easily find some groups or people within Turkey itself who are supporting such a kind of an idea, but this was over. Now Turkey has to face with the realities of its region and the realities of the global politics as well. This is related with capacity and capability. Do you have any resources? Do you have any interest? And is it sustainable to follow such a kind of a policy? Therefore, assertive and aggressive policies are acceptable for Turkey itself unless they are serving the interest of all those neighboring countries. Now we are discussing Turkey in different regions, from the Eastern Mediterranean to Caucasus, from the Black Sea region to the Middle East. And you see active Turkey dealing with its own issues, from terror to balance the other topics. Therefore, domestic issues are also prevailing around in Turkey, and Turkey emerges, whether it's a reliable and loyal actor in its Western links and relations is an important thing. Why we have such a kind of a labels? Of course, part of the blame is on Turkey, especially the current government since 2006-7 follows such a kind of a policy, a kind of a zero problems with its neighbors. But at the end, we have many issues with our neighbors, from Greece to Syria, from Iraq to Israel, from Egypt to let me say, Bulgaria as well. And these are the issues that we have to face with in Turkey. But what makes Turkey unique in those issues? We are not, or Turkey is not Russia. Therefore, there is a kind of a vivid and very lively discussion and opposition within Turkey itself to change Turkey's track. But how to resolve those issues? It is not only Turkey's capacity to offer such a kind of a resolution, all those issues. For example, a couple of weeks ago, we have NATO summit, and Turkey was one of the signatories of this NATO summit meeting and actively participated any kind of activities. You see, for example, Turkey as an active contributor to Black Sea drills or exercises. And then in the Eastern Mediterranean, I agree with my colleagues, we need a kind of a sea change in fact, with the participation of all those governments. As Alessia mentioned, Turkey and Egypt. And then as Gabriel mentioned, many people supporting Turkey's change and the priorities over Israel and Egypt. And I don't know whether it's under those current circumstances, whether Turkey has managed to change its policy priorities, but the price is getting higher and higher day by day. And it seems that Turkey or Turkish policy makers or decision makers are in need of changing their attitude and the, of course, narrative. Therefore, this narrative of neo-Ottomanist Turkey is destructive, not only for Turkey and for the other regional actors, but Turkey's relations with the others as well. Therefore, we need to create such a kind of a new narrative to move forward. We need to see much more Western actors, and there are clues, in fact. Turkish-Greek talks is going on. Turkish-Egyptian talks are going on. Most probably Turkish-Israeli connections and talk are going on. And at the end, most probably in a dynamic environment, we may end up with a new policy and new worldview, but it depends also Turkey's domestic politics as well.
Thank you, Mithat. Remaining on Turkey, two quick questions. Why did Turkey's blue homeland maritime doctrine become so popular among the policy elite, military leaders and ordinary people? This is the first question. And then an evaluation from your side. Do you think that the assertive foreign policy in the Eastern Mediterranean has been effective from your perspective?
Let's start with this. Yeah, I am on. Let me start with this blue homeland. It's defined and considered by many other players, especially by rivals, as I said. But for the Turkish policymakers, as I mentioned in my presentation, the threat perception is prevailing. There is a kind of a threat perception. I'm not supportive of this aura and understanding, but the first component is about the fear of being under attack or being circled by the outside powers. And the second component is about the regional ambitions of Turkey. And this blue homeland policy serves those ambitions and funnels, of course, the threat perception as well. And the inventors of this policy, in fact, they are not popular as a person in Turkish policy or daily politics, but their suggestion served, in fact, for the future perspective. It's a kind of an illuminating roadmap, in fact. It defines Turkey's axis of geopolitical zones of influence and defense. And therefore, the threat perception helped the others to use, especially the government, to use this term to bring all the opposition all together as well under those circumstances. And this ISMET Energy Forum, this was a threat for the others. And this is the reason why we are discussing the balance, to balance the others within the region. And if Turkey considers that the developing energy alliance in the Eastern Mediterranean has threatened to upend Turkey's energy policy, the primary goal has been to maintain Turkey's position as an energy hub between the East and West and North and South. And how you can familiarize or how to bring the other people together in Turkey. And this blue stream or blue homeland narrative helped to bring all the groups, even the opposition groups in Turkey, and to move forward. And it also contributes Turkey's security, naval security, maritime security perspective as well. And this was the reason. But last couple of, let me say, months, you don't hear the word, in fact, within Turkey as well. And what happened to admirals? These are also related with Turkey's domestic politics, as I said. And for the government or the presidential administration, there is a kind of an expectation to have a kind of success story after Syrian operations or what happened in Iraq to fight against terrorism. What makes the government very effective or assertive in its neighborhood and its regions was blue homeland. Then most probably what's happening in the Caucasus put all those blue homeland related issues aside, and Turkey changed its direction towards EU and Greece for negotiations For example, 8 months ago or at the beginning of this year, it was unimaginable for many, not only in Turkey, but in the region as well. Therefore, this is a kind of a new invention to develop a new perspective for the groups in Turkey. This is the reason, but it is a kind of an unproductive thing at the end.
Thank you, Mithat. Looking at the role of international players in the area, there is an interesting question on Russia. To all the panelists, how do you see Russia's interest and behaviors as both a major producer and exporter of hydrocarbons and a power willing to play a relevant role in the Mediterranean? Would like to answer this question? Maybe Gabi?
Sure, I'll give it a shot. Obviously, Russia has historically been an important actor in the Eastern Mediterranean, continues to be an important actor, both due to its strategic base of operations in Syria, its role in the Syrian civil war, its support or engagement with actors like Turkey, but also actors like Hezbollah, and the role that it's played in Libya. So Russia is a constant, just the same way that the Eastern Mediterranean is Europe's backyard. Russia, at the very least, can try to make similar claims. And of course, the Eastern Mediterranean for decades was a theater of American operations, which I have no doubt that actors in Russia are more than happy to fill the void as the United States slowly withdraws from the region. So I think that when it comes to Russia's engagement, there are two separate ways of looking at it. First, Russia is not particularly threatened by Eastern Mediterranean hydrocarbons, which comparatively do not match its own capacity, but it doesn't have any issue playing a small spoiler role, even though at this present moment it seems like the actors of the Eastern Mediterranean can handle that on their own and they don't necessarily need all that much Russian interference. But certainly it's in Russia's interest that there continue to be outstanding disputes between Eastern Mediterranean actors, and in particular between Turkey and the other actors of the region. Turkey, as a member of NATO, and at least historically an important member within the transatlantic alliance, seems to be shifting in an independent or more independent direction. So long as that occurs, and so long as Turkey's issues with other Eastern Mediterranean states are not resolved, that serves and works to Russia's advantage. So certainly if you're looking to kind of contain Russia's influence, that's perhaps the most important place to start. But Russia is here, and Russia is not going away anytime soon. And my expectation is that in the coming years, Russian companies are going to try to explore and exploit offshore hydrocarbon resources, whether in the waters of Lebanon or in Syria. And so the Russian angle is going to be ever present.
Thanks, Gabi. And I would like to turn to Alessia, as Russia and Egypt were on the same page, on the same side in Libya. So, Alessia, from your point of view, what's Russia's role in the region?
Yes, the role of Russia in Libya has been and is really important, especially I think in this particular moment. But also I think that Libya is not really strategic for Russia, it's more static. And for this reason, I think that he tried to avoid a direct confrontation with Turkey and the other side. Of course, this remain a problem, and Egypt also have to deal with if it want to diffuse tension in the country and create this sort of appeasement with Turkey or ease this rapprochement, with this possible rapprochement. Also, I agree with what Gabriel stated about the role, the increasing role of Russia in the Eastern Mediterranean, maybe in the next future. But also, I think that another time, if we look at the general context that is underway in the Eastern Mediterranean, so this sort of changing in alliance, maybe it's possible to think about possibility of diffusing tension and paving the way for possible initiative to promote a more cooperative security architecture. In this case, I think that both European Union and NATO should have a more active role and encourage enhancing their already existing program of engagement and cooperation, such as the Mediterranean dialogue and the European neighborhood policies, which suffered during the last decade of a lack of interest, commitment, and of course implementation. And I think that the space left by this treatment of the United States should be filled by, of course, the new America of Biden, and of course by a new role that the EU and the NATO should, and I think will carry it out in the next future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alessia. We are getting to the end, almost to the end to this panel. But I would like to ask to all of you a question from a European perspective. How do you see the role of the EU? What role for the EU from the regional perspective, from the perspective of different regional countries? Would like to answer first this question. Mithat, Gabriel, Zenonas, yes. Just
go first.
Just very quickly.
Yeah. There's not much to say, so I'll be quick anyway. I mean, we know that the EU has a fundamental problem, having a coherent foreign policy. And the Eastern Mediterranean is not an exception. Actually, the Eastern Mediterranean is one of the most problematic areas for the EU, given that they have these two main problems that are now blocking somehow decisions within the EU, this triangle between the EU, Turkey, and what is happening in the Eastern Mediterranean with Greece and Cyprus. So I believe that if the EU were to play a positive role in various ways, either by pressuring or incentivizing actors in the region to overcome their problems through a European framework, that would definitely unlock the different possibilities in the Eastern Mediterranean. But we have so far seen that there is a great difficulty in achieving that, because obviously there are various different interests within the EU that, by extension, block any united efforts to accomplish one specific thing, and they tend to go different ways. So I'm not very hopeful about how effective the EU can be in the area.
Thank you, Zenonas. So not positive about the role of the EU, but it's very realistic, your position, of course. So we get to the end of our panel. Thank you very much for your interventions, for this very insightful and fruitful discussion. Let me thank also all people that attended virtually this panel. And last but not least, I would like to thank my colleagues, Igor, Beatrice, and Erika, for their precious support. So thank you very much, and have a good evening. See you next time.
See you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.